Alrighty, so I got some GT500 all carbon wheels. Typically these wheels run about $5,000 a piece. Today I'm going to show you guys realistically my thought process and how I achieve this without creating failures. The goal is to create a product that will last a really long time. He knows that these wheels do take a beating from road debris. He's seen older ones that aren't protected with rock chips all the way through it. So customer wants to make this look as good as he possibly can, but ultimately our goal is to make sure that we deliver a product that's not going to fail over time with improper stretch or, you know, installing for Instagram. Firstly, we washed this, we deconned it, we prepped it, I polished it also, just so that I can create the highest amount of surface energy, because this does take a lot of film manipulation. Once it was polished, I alcoholed it and made sure that I got any type of grime or grease or anything that could ruin my day. When I do these wheels, this is prepped and ready to go. I do the center with a lot of gel. The main reason is it's really hard to introduce the right ratio of like soap and slip that I would typically go for, and the gel will help create a good suction, because if you don't know, gel is kind of like your soap and rinse in one bottle. It allows me to manipulate the film still before I squeegee, and then when I do squeegee, it creates a nice solid tack that, if my soap to rinse ratio isn't correct, might not actually happen. So I do the center with gel, and then I do pretty much everything else with soap and rinse. So I got my sheet here. It's roughly 30 by 30. I'm gonna spray the center with gel. So this does have an extremely deep concave. If we were to just lay this film flat, the distance from here to the center of the wheel is probably about 4 inches. If you were to just pull this and try to bridge this, you're gonna create a ton of tension where the lug nuts go and the center cap goes, which would then create failure points. But we're trying to maximize the amount of coverage that we're trying to get with this installation. So what we're gonna do is manipulate the film as much as possible to reduce the amount of stretch. But when you start pushing it in like this, you're creating a ton of baggage, as you can see with all these areas right here. This is where film manipulation really comes into play. And our goal is going to be to shift a lot of this excess in between the spokes. And when that happens, we're now capable of having extra film to wrap deeper in between, maximizing the coverage without creating unnecessary stretch. I typically try to move the material already kind of in between these areas and try to distribute the film evenly. And this is where like that polishing really comes into play. Creating high surface energy with the clear coat is going to help make sure that when I am ready to squeegee this, it's going to tack instantly and hold the film. I would say this is probably one of the more time-consuming parts when doing this, because you need to make sure you can't fully press it down or you're gonna fully get too much baggage around these areas, but you don't want it too bridged to where you can't work the film. So everything looks pretty similar on my end right now. So what we're trying to do right now is create a line before all of these fingers, because we're going to work the fingers up to the spokes. So once I kind of get this line in, okay. So we got our center locked in. Now we're going to start moving this excess around. So the goal is to apply stretch and move this excess material inwards towards this center. And the reason why we're doing that is you can see that now this film is relaxed. Yeah, there's a bunch of baggage here, but this relaxes in and wraps past this point right here. And if you didn't notice, I put this on a bucket so that I don't have to move around the wheel. I can just turn the wheel as I'm working. Now lastly, the last one is the hardest, because as you've been rotating it, you've been shifting the material in a direction. So technically you usually have a little bit extra compared to the other ones. We got the center done. It is laid. Typically from this point, I'm actually going to trim out all the lug nuts, get those wrapped in, so that you can actually see that when I'm very confident in like the amount of stretch that was actually put in here, because I relaxed it as much as I possibly can, that there is no risk of snapback when I cut these and wrap those edges. I'm gonna focus on one spoke at a time, and we're gonna get to the scary part. We need to create enough stretch specifically in this point where the spoke bends to flat, so that when we're ready to wrap the side, we don't create a ton of fingers, and then we can maximize the amount of coverage we have. The only way to get that stretch is to isolate this specific spoke. So what we're gonna do is, you have a lot of baggage here. You can see about how far you wanna come down. I go about a 1/2 inch from that point, and then I split the spoke. And same for this side. I go figure out where that is, get about 1/2 inch, and then go like that. And this is where it kind of gets a little scary, because anyone knows that when you create a relief cut and then there's tension right here, this will continue splitting. But realistically, that's what I'm going for, and that's why I created this baggage right here, is so that now I can take this point right here and I'm gonna push down expecting this to split, but since this part is already laid, it's gonna allow me to press down and wrap into that area. So same thing, I'm making sure that I'm not starting to apply pressure until I get past here. So once I get those two sections laid, like that, now when I pull, instead of pulling from where it's split, it's gonna pull from where it's stretched. So now that I have that, I can isolate this one spoke. I can pull it how I need to pull it to get the stretch. But what I'm gonna do now is, we call it controlled stretching. Typically when you pull a piece, it's gonna stretch from where you're pulling and from where it's tacked. So as you can see, right, it's still pulling from the whole thing, but most of the stretch is coming from this one specific area. And then now, right, so my hands, you see where my hands are, stretch is gonna come from my fingertips to here. But since this has been steamed, majority of the stretch will happen in this area. So anything behind my fingers is technically relaxed film. So when I stretch it, I wanna make sure I stretch it and then lay it, because right here is relaxed, right? So now you can see how this lays flat with no fingers, and then this lays flat with no fingers. and then I'll go back through and I'll clean up this cut. We filled this area with soap so the film will slide, allowing us to feed into this channel. Once I get all that air out, I'm gonna go through, really focusing on the recess section. Now I'm gonna repeat this 6 more times. So, spokes are laid, sides are laid, everything's cut. Now we're gonna lay, I guess these ends, the rim. I start in the valve stem just to get it lined up. It's not how I would do the rest of them, but this one I want to make sure is perfectly gapped around, and then I'll work my way outwards. The last thing I'm trying to do is cut the material around this just because it's so awkward. It's nice because since I use the butt seam of the carbon, it makes it very easy to see where I need to cut. Again, just for longevity. There's gonna be a lot of little scrap pieces, so I got this bucket right here. We'll come back through with a heat gun, and then voila. Outside of trimming it, the next 5 of these go by very, very quick, but I always make sure I finish each section just so that I don't forget it later. And that's how we do GT500 carbon wheels at Auto Film Solutions. What a waste of love.